So, for the benefit of the tape, my name's Ben Hawkes. I'm Chief Commercial Officer. Sorry, that sounds like a police interview. For the benefit of the tape, I'm Ben Hawkes, Chief Commercial Officer. I have with me in the interview room James Boucher, who's currently indicted to appear at blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so this is James Boucher. He is one of the player relations managers with TrueMind. TrueMind being the organization dedicated to upgunning elite mental performance in youth football to begin with, and soon to be all of football. But James is one of our player relations managers. His job ultimately is to be a shining light in amongst all the darkness to show football players what is possible in terms of moving from a paradigm where we are very serious about looking after the physical vessel, i.e., the body, i.e., physiology, performance in that sense, to spending much, 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 much more time, energy, and placing more importance on looking after what is going on between the ears and wherever else consciousness may be located. So, James, it's a pleasure to speak to you properly for the first time. We've pressed record. How deeply impersonal, or perhaps how 2025. So, I'm going to pepper you with questions over the next 40 minutes or so, just to draw out a little bit about you and your journey with TrueMind, because you are a test subject from the first
Correct.
research phase, which makes you A, deeply interesting, B, very important in terms of working out where we go with this and demonstrating the value. So, James, first of all, thank you for giving us your time. You're currently signed with which Spanish club?
A club called Los Barrios.
Lost.
So it's a club playing in Andalusia, region of Spain.
Yeah,
And my transfer, I originally entered the club in November, began training with them, and then had to wait for my international clearance. And finally, that's now all sorted. And just this weekend, I made my first appearance in the match day squad. So,
which we saw on social media, and we were very, very glad and proud. Now, forgive the question. How old are you?
21, 21.
21. Okay. To me, it seems alien, abnormal that a 21-year-old English lad, everyone's a lad to me, I'm incredibly old, I apologize for that, is playing his football in Spain.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that it's not the normal thing to do, especially when I'm not even full-time professional
Yep.
as of now. Um, so yeah, no, the reason I am in Spain is because of my career as a mental performance coach. So I'm currently on a placement year as a Loughborough University student where I
Yep.
study sport and exercise psychology.
Hmm.
The opportunity came out to come over to Spain to I work with elite junior golfers who are
Right.
essentially like me, looking
Hmm.
to forge a career in the professional game, but in golf. So I am here as a mental performance coach, utilizing all my knowledge that I built up in psychology. And alongside that, I obviously have my own ambitions in football and through Will support with True Mind techniques. I believe that's the reason that I was able to sort of create this opportunity to play in Spain. But yes, like you said, it's very, very unique, I'd say, for 21-year-old footballer to be playing in Spain.
Hmm.
It's massively pushed me outside my comfort zone and exposed me to things that I would say massively helped me grow as just a person. It just in terms of just the language, in terms of the whole culture is completely different over here to what I'm used to. And even me being so young still, I'm still naturally maturing and developing in my own football. So trying to combine that, doing it away from family, away from home, it is very challenging. But I believe I've built up sort of the mental resilience and tools to be able to ensure that I not only just get through it and survive it, but I feel like I'm thriving at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there was a really interesting post on LinkedIn this morning from Temasam Williams, who's coached at Spurs, Arsenal, and Fulham, talking about how youth academies can possibly be seen as failing young men and women because they don't prepare them for that change between clubs, between gaffers, between performance directors, between any level of change in the coaching system. But we're going. So you are from North
Correct,
Yorkshire
North
lad,
Yorkshire.
21. How long you been in football?
I mean, I've played football since the age of 4 or 5. So it's
And
always been my main priority and passion.
And how long have you been in a kind of formalized setting of football?
When I'd say from the age of about 10, I left to join one of the top division grassroots teams around North Yorkshire.
Yeah,
So I was always playing at the highest level of grassroots. I
yeah.
then got opportunities to go into the professional setup, trials with Newcastle United and Middlesbrough, and always just felt with my background coming from North Yorkshire going into these sort of environments, I was always massively outside my comfort zone.
Mm,
Technically, I believe as a footballer, I'd like to believe I was good enough to be there, but mentally, and that's probably the reason why now I'm so invested in the mental side of things. I probably didn't truly believe I deserved to be there.
hmm.
And that probably then showed in my behaviors. Now I understand a little bit more about why I was quite shy when I was younger and probably just didn't really feel comfortable in the environment. And I almost now feel I understand why I maybe didn't stay in that full-time professional environment or academy because probably subconsciously I was that uncomfortable. I didn't truly want to express myself and really showcase my talents on the pitch
Mm.
out of almost fear of being in that environment and just being exposed, not being good enough, or but also just that thing about just being around the changing room. It's when you're quite a quiet lad, like I was when I was younger, it's not the easiest thing to do, be around a lot of it's a squad of 20 lads. They're all quite big jokers, football environments, and it probably was just as much as dealing with that as opposed to them or the football aspect of it on the pitch.
Yeah. No, I get that. I because they're not kind of big lads at that point. They're men.
Exactly,
To
yeah.
to you or to whoever is in the lesser part of that hierarchy. I remember being an 18-year-old rifleman with my reserve unit in London from a middle class family, and I was surrounded by these big blokes from South London, from West London. They'd had time in. They'd been to Bosnia. They'd been to Northern Ireland, and it took me 18 months to say a word in the bar. And until that point, I'm just watching. What's going on? How do I not disgrace myself? And I can imagine being in a high pressure academy environment. It's much the same, no?
Yes, so I'd say this started when I was in around, I think about the age of 12, 13. I got my first opportunity to trial at these clubs. And I then would say after about 2 years, because I never officially actually ever signed forms with the academies, I would go and there was a lot of uncertainty in that you'd get a letter saying, come back next week. And then suddenly, I can't exactly put my finger on why, but I just remember then I suddenly stopped going and then just went back to playing grassroots football. I always remember a time when 15, 16, I left my club, so my junior team that I was playing with, where I had a really secure environment. All my teammates, I got on with them all really well. And I don't know if that was looking back now, psychologically starting to me sort of probably cope with feeling like, oh, what's happening with my football? Why I thought I'd be in a professional club. Why is this happening? Why am I not playing at this level? Why am I not enjoying it? Why am I feeling a bit of like anxiety before games and things like
Mm,
that? So looking back now, I left to go to a new grassroots team about the age of 16. And then from there, I'd started to really get interested in psychology and sports psychology and started to read up about it. And I feel like then I started to actually learn about things and definitely, thankfully, looking back now, I've changed my mindset from quite a young age. But there must be so many footballers that just never get exposed to this just because of a lack of awareness. They don't realize what their brain is hardwired to do in terms of keep them safe, survival.
hmm.
And moving on from that, I then stepped into the senior game from the age of, I would say about 18, 18, 17, 18. I stepped up to play senior football. So that was a new challenge, a new transition, but it's something that now I've had a good 3, 4 years of experience in. I feel like I would consider myself now a senior footballer. I feel like I've
Hmm.
moved on from that youth sort of age, which I feel like can be something that footballers probably around my age can find difficult. Sort of that transition from going as a youth player, where you still almost perceive yourself as a youth player, to then actually
Hmm.
fully believing, okay, I'm a senior footballer. And I think it's quite a big transformation that you have to go through in your mind to truly believe I'm a senior footballer. This is what I'm meant to be doing. This is what I do, hopefully for a career to build to live from doing this sport.
Mm.
For me, obviously, I'm still having to combine that doing my studies with obviously the aspiration to get to the full-time game. But I think that was another big thing. So yeah, and then here I am now. It's 21-year-old playing in Spain,
It
believing
ain't
that
bad.
I'm moving
It's
in the
not.
right direction.
It's not bad. To what extent do you feel like the academy system has lost a good prospect because they weren't able to? Well, I was about to say handle you, but that makes you sound kind of like a problem or abnormal. But the idea of going into a high pressure environment from a childhood scenario where things are quite quiet, things are quite familiar, is going to be a massive issue for anybody. So, what do you think the academy system, let's say, because we're talking about your interactions with a couple of them, how do you think it could change its behavior towards its prospects in order to make them feel more comfortable, put them in the context where they can perform or retain them? What can that look like? What can a future look like, do you think?
It's a very, very good question because looking back, when I was 13, I would have absolutely no right to understand what's going on. So I
No, no,
almost
hey,
think,
stop there, brother. What do you mean no right to understand what's going on? What does that mean?
as a 13-year-old, my education is obviously at a much lower level to where I would get in my education nowadays.
Okay, okay, I'll let you
Um,
off.
but of course, it's I almost just think it's clubs building the awareness because I think unconsciously clubs just aren't aware of how brains, children's athletes, young footballers' brains are developed.
Yeah.
It's almost like as people, we have all these innate needs, wants, desires that I think clubs probably just aren't aware of. To them, it's just all everything they see on the surface is just about the football passing the ball 5 yards. Oh, why have you misplaced that? But at the same time, they don't realise why this footballer's on that training pitch. He's got 20 different thoughts going through his head about what am I going to do tomorrow when I've not got training. It's just, the brain just produces all these random thoughts, and it's like as much as we try to get immersed in sport, there's times
Mm.
when you're on the training pitch, but you're not on the training pitch, if you know what I mean. It's like you're there, but you're not really there because you're thinking about so many different things. Or you're thinking, oh, I've got homework due tomorrow. Oh no, when am I going to do it? Or if I do
Mm.
my homework, oh no, I'm not going to have to train. It's like all these competing wants and desires and thoughts that the mind's constantly creating. I think that's one of the big things I'd say in terms of TrueMind. It's almost, I feel like I've developed I call it like a mental architecture in terms of like dealing with all these inputs that the mind creates and just finding the best ways to make the best decisions that I can with the level of consciousness and knowledge that I've got at that moment in time.
Yeah. It's an interesting point. I was an Army cadet instructor for about 10 years or so. And we'd take an entire battalion of kids who were 12 to 18 years old, maybe 1,000 of them, take them away from their home, put them through some rigorous training. It was all good fun. But we realized when we sat and thought about it, we were treating all of the kids the same. We were getting them all out of the bed at the same time. They were all doing basically the same activity with different levels of skill required and engagement required. And we were expecting the same results. Now, obviously, if you get a 14-year-old out of bed at 6 a.m., you're not going to get the result you want, which is kind of makes a mockery of the school system being so cookie cutter.
Mm.
You want to get them out of bed at 10. You want to be giving them a break in the middle of the afternoon, and perhaps you can get something out the evening. But with the younger kids, you can do it slightly differently. So but it doesn't baffle me because I understand a modicum about modern sports and how they view the human. But it does baffle me that no one has started to make inroads. Well, someone has, TrueMind has. But if you look at the competing avatars on the field right now, you've got the different ways that the human player is differentiating themselves from their family, from their friend group, from society, and all the different levels of individuation they're going through, which cross over the academy experience. We can then chuck in hormones. We can then chuck in the normal vicissitudes of daily life, homework, discovering who we are, maybe from a identity perspective. It's 2025. We can chuck in gender as well. Why the hell not? What you want to do with your life. So what I'm getting from you is you were this avatar with multiple aspects and multiple thought streams, multiple sets of issues that you had to be cognizant of, were worried about, and you were treated as a football performance delivery mechanism. And that's it. Did you
Yeah,
feel
I
like that?
think I think a big thing I've come to learn is, and I think it's difficult because you have these aspirations and dreams, and you're so invested in them that you can almost become tunnel vision. And I think a word that comes to mind is abundance. In that, I feel like athletes are so they almost believe that all or nothing, and they're thinking very dichotomous.
Mm,
Everything's about scarcity, and I believe that like they believe their whole thought process needs to be about optimizing themselves as athletes. And I think then you actually lose that holistic aspect of things and actually suppress what like humans are actually innately meant to do and have like various interests, various hobbies, various almost like different ways to spend their time. It doesn't always purely need to be thinking football, 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 football. That's
mm,
not me saying you can't be dedicated, you can't sacrifice. Yes, I think you can do all them things and be extremely dedicated, but I also think you need to allow space and time for like mental recharge to think about other things, not always purely being defined by football. And that's opening your mind up, having like a more of an abundance thought process in terms of even for me, for example, had the potential to make my debut for my new club this weekend, which didn't actually happen in the end. But for me, I was in a mindset now of me 3, 4 years ago, I'd have been so anxious, so nervous. My life off the pitch would have just been thought about, oh, what do I need to do? What extra thing can I eat to prepare perfectly? But now I was actually, I guess this is testament to the mind that I've built over the years, but I was I'm quite big into journaling and sort of writing things down. And
hmm
I almost just had the perspective of I was so detached from whether or not I was even going to make my debut because I was so excited because I knew the longer term perspective of this is I'm going to build more experience and more knowledge about how to prepare better for my next debut when it comes, whether that be in 2 or 3 years' time. And I was more excited about building up the knowledge and the wisdom for like my brain, what's going to help me prepare my brain for if I'm making my debut on a much bigger scale in 2, 3 years' time. And it was almost like I was almost excited to see how my brain was going to react. And it sounds probably alien to 99.9% of people who would have just been purely thinking, oh no, I've got my debut tomorrow. Oh no, I need to eat at this time. I need to go to bed at that time. Which is it's good to think about them things, but it's just instead of being completely consumed by them, it's like how can I open my mind up and think about this in such a creative, different way? And when you think about things a different way, your whole energy, your whole just perspective on things completely changes, and you generally become excited. You head towards things, and it's just all from having the consciousness to think about things in a different way.
Well, it doesn't sound alien. It sounds very healthy. Sounds like you
Yeah,
are summoning
yeah,
Herculean amounts of awareness, control, uh, whatever word we're going to choose. It just sounds healthy.
yeah.
I
I mean, it makes me feel healthy as well.
Well, it should do. I mean, calm, peace is deeply healthy. And one of the things that Will always taught me was that when you're sat there, I mean, we were talking in a business entrepreneurial founder context for me. If you receive bad news, you simply wind the clock back, regrade bad news as information, and then
Yeah,
look at information, remove emotional charge, sit back, maybe meditate, maybe go for a walk, and solution to former artist formerly known as problem will appear. And it's just about perspective.
yeah,
I'm expecting my debut. Okay, great. That's not happening. Okay, great. Same reaction every single time. New information.
yeah,
What new opportunities will present themselves as a consequence of this change in the event stream? And it's a very, very healthy way of doing things, rooted in what is,
absolutely.
as JP would say, and rooted in what is now. So, when did you start being aware of Mr. Will Mellors-Blair and his message and how he was broadcasting it?
So I was always around the age of, I'd say mean, 2, 3 years ago, I was always very interested in sort of sports psychology. I still am to this day, but I was always searching around things on online, social media, and I got to a point where I felt like I was doing all these extra little things, but just wasn't really seeing any difference in my performance on the pitch. And I actually came across Will because I'm at Loughborough University and I went to watch a football game. I don't actually know if I've ever told Will this, but it was at Loughborough Dynamo, which is at the local non-league team. And Will was actually playing in that game. And I remember just looking at him and I just thought, he looks like he's doing something different to all these other players. It was just like a visual thing, but even just the way he just operated on the pitch, I just thought, he's got something about him. And I don't know what it was, but I just remember thinking that. And then, funnily enough, on my social media, I actually came across his account, and he was sort of advertising himself. And then I sort of looked into his feed a little bit and saw he was really sort of professional in the way he was sort of thinking about himself and his football. And then I saw, oh, he's very into sort of psychology and mental performance, which really aligned with me. And I think he reached out to me, and I've always been quite open-minded to just think, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to invest in this thing. And I've always been quite big on having mentors and learning from people, which I think's been a big strength of mine. So I just, after a little bit of brief contact with Will, I decided to invest into his program. And from that, he carried out like an MLT and a mental MLT, and gave me some steps to move forward. And we just sort of built on it from there. And I kept checking in with him. And I've been working with Will now for over a year. And if you'd compared where I was when I first invested in him to where I am today, if anything, it's just further solidified and confirmed my belief in the power of the mind and being conscious and intentional. And it's really sort of, he's massively improved my life, essentially.
Mm. No, mine too. And what do you mean by, I know what you mean, that he looks different. And I would argue that anyone that goes through a process like this, they start to look different anyway. You
Yeah.
know, the body language, the way you hold yourself, the way you look, the way your eyes. I always think about. So one of my businesses, the sales director, I've recently got in touch with Gio McNee, chief performance director for chief performance officer, my bad, for TrueMind, and he's done some work with my sales director, and I saw the difference just on a Zoom call between the brightness in his eyes, the energy, the way he was holding his body. It was just completely different. It was so interesting. So, what did you recognize from Will when you were looking at him operating on the pitch? I assume this was when he was playing for Stamford. I'm not expecting you to say that there was a golden rod of light that came from the heavens, but what were you picking up? What was in your perception?
I think it was just, yeah, and a lot of it was around body language on the pitch, the way he was stood. I'd say even just the way he had his kit on, he just looked very professional. Like you obviously get some clubs at my semi-professional level, the kit's a bit baggy and things like that. But I think I looked at Will and thought he looks like a professional athlete playing in this game. It
Mm.
was just yeah, like his mannerisms he was displaying, um, even probably the way he was talking to his teammates and his voice, that from what I could hear briefly from the sidelines. But I couldn't necessarily put my finger on one particular thing, but a lot of it I would just say was in terms of his body language and the way he was just sort of moving his body on the pitch. And
Mm.
he's probably not quite an athletic player as well, which probably made me naturally more drawn to think he's quite a good player. So that probably again made me think, oh, he's something that he's got something going there. He looks like he's a good player.
And then he just happened to reach out to you on social media.
Yes, yes.
Isn't that a
I think
thing?
or maybe I saw his account, followed it, and then I think he reached out to me,
Yeah.
if my memory's right.
Well, either or, we don't believe in coincidences at True Mind in any way, shape, or form. So that MOT, um, I think what we'll do is we'll talk about the psychological aspects of that in another session. But I'm interested in your view because Will and I were talking about this earlier, how the physical inputs for a player can affect the level and quality of consciousness. What kind of physical pieces or aspects were you looking at during that MOT? And what changed as a consequence of the decisions you'd made or made subsequent to that?
Yes, so Will initially asked the question in terms of what sort of recovery techniques, nutrition, training techniques do you currently have in place? And I've always been quite big into the gym in terms of doing my injury prevention work, things like yoga, mobility and stretching. And I always looked after my diet. I always liked to think I ate well and educated myself on that. And it wasn't massive life-changing habits that he was getting me to do. It was just still very marginal, small little things. For example, helping me improve my sleep with little habits. So, for example, listening to certain sort of energy, voice vibrations, or doing sort of meditations before I go to bed, which really improves sleep quality,
Mm,
increasing my sort of nutritional intake of certain food groups, more fruits and vegetables, um, different sort of forms of mobility and yoga, just to sort of test the body in other ways. So it wasn't necessarily these extreme things that caused these changes. It was more just the compounding effect of being consistent with it and sort of implementing it to have a genuine purpose. So, for example, genuinely doing something before I go to bed because I know it's going to improve my sleep. And I know if I improve my sleep, I'm going to perform as a better version of me the next day.
mhm,
And it's such a little thing to say, but people probably deep down know, oh, I know a good night's sleep will give me well, but it's actually then putting that input into your body to allow the positive outputs to occur. And it's having
mm,
the sort of insight to know that actually, if I keep doing these good habits, yes, I might not see any results for a few weeks, few months, but actually, I'm building like an operation for my body and to have a mental, physical routine that's going to allow me to build the best version of me that I can be, and it's getting my brain trained to have all these good habits, which become easier and easier because the mind adapts and what you put into your mind, it sort of then seeks that familiarity and wants to do it more regularly. So you therefore then your body essentially is primed to want to do good things that help you in a personal but also in a professional sense in terms of being a footballer or an athlete, whatever that may be.
mm. And to what extent do you think your peers would collapse back into high time preference behavior, wanting instant gratification? Because what you're talking about is the very healthy habit of having a low time preference and building tomorrow today.
Yeah.
Which especially, you've got 30 years on me, and I've trained myself to be a low time preference guy. I started on New Year's Day with 5 press ups. I'm up to something else today. So to what extent do you think low time preference behaviors are alien to your peers?
In terms of the club I'm at now, I would say I see maybe 5 or 10% of people doing those little things in terms of stretching, which
Yeah.
isn't a lot of them, to be honest. It's obviously I know it's bigger than stretching, but I definitely think footballers, or not even just footballers, just human beings, it's so easy to get drawn into that immediate gratification
Mm,
that it probably likely also comes to a lack of awareness and a lack of knowledge and a lack of true sort of hope and belief in a positive future that they generally then just think, I'm going to just do what's going to give me pleasure in the here and now because they're not truly tuned into where they're actually heading. They're not in alignment with what they actually want, what they want to challenge themselves to see if they can accomplish.
mm,
I feel like when you lack that sense of purpose, that direction, that alignment, it's very easy then just to focus on, right, what's going to give me the most pleasure right here, right now. Whereas I think if you connect it to something much bigger and have sort of the mental sort of agility to think about, okay, where do I actually want to be in 1 year's time, 2 years' time, 3 years' time? Okay, how am I going to get there? And then Will obviously talks a lot about sort of being that version of you that you want to be in the here and now. And I think I resonated with that very well. I don't know if again it was just naturally sort of suited my sort of traits and personality because I always was quite a hardworking, disciplined, willing to tolerate a bit of uncomfort in terms of sacrificing for a later gain. But I just very much think connecting to that bigger goal and that bigger vision helps people cultivate them habits a lot more easier, as opposed to seeing it as a chore, which I think a lot of people and probably peers that I have in football see it as. They don't actually truly see it as having any long-term benefit, but also the short-term pleasure that you actually get when you know that this is helping me cultivate the future that I want.
A very well thought out answer. So we're gonna speak again, but before we finish today's session, I just want to ask you, because you've mentioned meditation before bed. To me, meditation is not an alien concept. It was a year ago, and it was really difficult for me to get my head around and really engage with. It was wrestling more than stroking a lot of the time. But how would you sell meditation as a concept and activity that is a non-negotiable to another 21-year-old, to a group of 10 to 30 21-year-old football players who may see it as voodoo, hoodoo, and woo?
Yeah. I mean, before I was properly introduced to it, I saw it in that way as well. So I wouldn't necessarily see it as a bad thing if that's what they how they perceive it as. But I almost think now, and it's a lot of it is my work here as a mental performance coach. It's actually it's a habit that just helps you develop a self-awareness and helps you get in tune with what's actually going on inside your head because so much of what we do as human beings is unconscious. We have so much stimulation from the external world, especially things like social media now, where it's so easy just to distract yourself. So I think just start small, set aside 5 minutes and even use it as a time. You don't even have to necessarily call it meditation, call it just visualization, whatever it is for you, just some time to just detach. Because I think when you actually have a bit of detachment from that everyday unconscious stream of thoughts and feelings, you actually start to, with the awareness you build, get in tune with what goals you actually want and what you want to achieve. And you start developing new ideas and new thoughts emerge. And it's just giving yourself some space to check in with yourself because when you then become more in tune with yourself, I feel like you naturally have more motivation, more energy, more excitement, more enthusiasm for life. And because you build all these things, you have a little bit more curiosity to maybe sit down for 5, 10 minutes, whatever it is you want to start to do a little bit of meditation, a bit of self-awareness, because you actually then see from thinking about certain things and getting certain visions in your mind, you start to create plans. Plans can turn into outcomes and things actually happen. And then you gain even more belief. Okay, actually, this does work because actually, it's like for me, I'm here in Spain. I remember it kind of, for me, it happened in, I wrote down on a piece of paper, I want to sort of be working up overseas and abroad. And 2 months, 3 months later, a job opportunity came up for a placement. And all of a sudden, I applied and then I started going through the process. And because I just, it might have no relationship or link whatsoever, but because I subconsciously wrote that down in my mind, it probably just gave me that extra 5, 10% belief thing. You know what? I probably can get this job. If I never wrote that, I probably wouldn't have been conscious, wouldn't have been aware. But it's by having these habits, meditation, even just writing down certain things, it just increases your consciousness and actually gives you like a belief that you can achieve things. So I'd say start small, give it a chance. Once you get the outcomes, you'll get even more motivation. You don't need the motivation to start.
James Boucher, it's almost as if that we are sovereign creators of our own reality. We'll leave that one there. James, you're a very, very special human being. I'm
Thank you
very,
very
very
much. Thank you.
glad to be sharing this journey with you. Thank you for your
Thank
insights.
you.
Thank you for your time. And we will press record again very soon to capture more of your journey. And I think talk about the transformation from what you were to what you are now, a
No, I
human Roman
appreciate it a lot.
candle of light. Thank you very much, sir. Stick
Thank you very
around,
much.
stick around, and we'll have a quick
Yep.
chat afterwards.
Nice one.